March the 8th, 2026. Guys, you're looking at info coming from the U.S. Central Command called CENTCOM, and you may have seen it in the some of the headlines today, and it happened today, but what has happened, the U.S. forces issue safety warnings to civilians in Iran. They're talking about all civilians, Iranian civilians and everything else, because they have started a massive bombing, along with Israel, of the petroleum and plants and refineries in Iran itself, close to Tehran, and some of the explosions look like movies, massive bombings or massive explosions. And so they are telling them, it's kind of like, don't be a human shield, because we're going to have to take out some of these areas and to get this regime out of place. And we don't want any civilian casualties. So this is what this warning is about. How does that play into some of the other factors? Because it could be a very important factor in changing the entire narrative of what we're seeing, and it could have a lot to do with Ezekiel. Let's take a look at the message itself. Coming out of Tampa, Florida, again, CENTCOM is issuing a safety warning to civilians in Iran today, March the 8th. As Iran's terrorist regime blatantly disregards the safety of innocent people. The Iranian regime is using heavily populated civil or civilian areas to conduct military operations, including launching one-way attack drones and ballistic missiles. This dangerous decision risks the lives of all civilians in Iran, since locations used for military purposes lose protected status and could become legitimate military targets under international law. Iranian forces are using crowded areas surrounded by civilians in cities such as Desful, Esfahan, and Shiraz to launch attack drones and ballistic missiles. Now, U.S. forces strongly urge civilians in Iran to stay at home. The Iranian regime is knowingly endangering innocent lives. Additionally, Iranian forces are jeopardizing the safety of innocent people throughout the Middle East by deliberately and indiscriminately targeting civilian airports, hotels, and residential neighborhoods. Iran's terrorist regime is blatantly disregarding civilian lives by attacking Gulf partners while compromising the safety of their own people. This is coming from Admiral Brad Cooper, the commander of CENTCOM. Iran has launched hundreds of ballistic missiles and thousands of one-way attack drones since February the 28th. However, launch rates have drastically declined as U.S. and partner forces decimate Iranians' military capabilities. Again, when they can, they take out the drone launchers, and without the launchers, the missiles just sit in a warehouse. Basically, you can't launch them without them. But they're not through, and they may be saving some of the bigger guns for later on. But what I'm concerned about is this. When you see the explosions in the video, I'll show you a little bit of it. I'll link to it. You'll understand the devastation that's being caused. And that hook in the jaw in Ezekiel, this could be one of the things. In other words, some nations that are backing out, they're not really in the fight. Turkey, for instance. Now, Russia, is helping Iran with intelligence. And Russia has very good satellite intelligence and things like that. They know where everything's at, just like the U.S. does. But they've been tied with Iran, along with China, for a long time. And so they're backing out. But what if there was suddenly a tremendous amount of civilian casualties? Now, whether it was a false flag or a true attack from Israel or the U.S., whatever, but a major loss, that could change the dynamics very quickly. And again, the nations that are staying out of this, Yahweh said, the God of Israel said that he will place that hook in that jaw and drag you into this situation. And this could very well be it. And if you think about it, and guys, as I thought about it, I started doing as much research as I could in order to make this video at least make some sense, okay? Anyway, the forces would move in under a peacekeeping pretense. Maybe it wasn't a pretense, but it started out that way. And then maybe something else happens to continue building that frustration, or they are feeling threatened themselves, to bring them right into the full battle. And God's purpose, according to Ezekiel 38 and 39, going through there, guys, is to show his people, remember, Israel, and those people are scattered all over the world. But also, if you understand the territorial situation that goes along with being the God of Israel, you understand what I'm saying. But anyway, something could happen, a humanitarian disaster, high civilian casualties, and it would call for international intervention. Then it would be the peacekeeping trap coming in. Coalition, Magog, Persia, etc. might use the justification of protecting civilians or restoring order as a legal and moral cover to move their forces into the region. It would be a strategic opportunity. What begins as a humanitarian mission could quickly turn into the literal gathering of the nations for the predicted invasions. That is Ezekiel. And that's exactly what was in my mind. What would be the consequences, and why today? I mean, they're quickly warning the civilians there that there could be massive losses. Now, if that happens, you may have retaliation coming in from both sides, different smaller countries, or there could be retaliation out in to some of the smaller countries like the UAE and all of that. But it looks like it would be someone on the side of Iran. And of course, their big brother is Russia. And we're very fortunate this war started without Russia's physical, hands-on military. But they have, and they are using, and have been, their extremely good intelligence and feeding it into Iran for their missiles and their targeting. It's out in the public. You can read about it. But they've been doing that for a long time, and they have deals with Iran to do that, probably tied to the deal they get on cheaper oil or whatever. You understand what I'm saying? But some of this has been in place for a minute. Well, something happens. They come in again as a pretense to keep the peace. But then when they gathered, and in Ezekiel, he says, I will bring this group, all their friends, all the nations into this. He is going to show the people, his children, that he is God. He's going to wake them up. And the reason he's going to do it, and the way he's going to do it, is it's going to look like definitely the end, with everybody in the world turning on Israel at that point. Now, and it brings up another point. We don't know exactly when that trigger will happen, but this is a very good indicator of that type of trigger. So I want you to pay attention. But if the U.S. accomplished what they wanted, or something happened and they had to back out, or they had to halt something, or Israel may have done something that even the U.S. couldn't stomach, just possibilities, then would the U.S. separate themselves from Israel at that point in the war? Because we're not really mentioned. They say, things about Tarshish and its ships and its islands, but it's not really mentioned that far. And we're here now basically starting the war and protecting Israel over it. So we're not mentioned, not particularly. And we've got infighting here, and there's really no way we can trust anyone, because it seems like there's different backstabbing going on every day. So if this is a major trigger, then we can look at what rapidly would develop into a full-scale Gog-Magog war. And that, again, a coalition, Magog-Persia, might use the justification of protecting civilians or restoring the order as a legal and moral cover to move the forces into the region. Sounds like a typical UN plan, as long as the other nations handle it for the UN. And it boils down to this, again, very good probability of this being the hook. The global outcry and isolation of a nation. Massive civilian losses typically lead to global isolation for the nation involved. The solitary nation prophecy often describes Israel as standing alone in the latter days. A surge in global anti-Semitism or diplomatic isolation following a bloody conflict could embolden the Northern Coalition to attack, believing no other superpowers like the U.S. would step in to help. Now, again, all of this information has been being put together for quite a while. We know the U.S. is there now. We are the big brother that's overseeing it and helping with it. And, of course, Israel is doing their share. And so I don't know if when they're talking about Israel and that nation being isolated, will that include the U.S. being in that area as part of Israel? We'll just have to see, or would they be backing out? We don't know the timing exactly, but with that CENTCOM message that came out today, that's the first thing that came into my mind. And again, that's when I started wanting to look just a little deeper. Now, Ezekiel 38, I'm not going to draw this out very long, but it's important to kind of understand the contents or context of what we're talking about here, about this hook and the trigger for that. 38:1, and the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, he's talking to Ezekiel, remember. Son of man, set thy face against Gog, the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, and prophesy against him. When people, and if you look at maps and a lot of, information coming out about that, when they point to Gog as being Russia and that land there. But it goes deeper than that. Again, O Gog, here's Ezekiel 38:3, and say, thus said the Lord God, behold, I am against thee, O Gog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. Where were those other chief princes? Michael, 21 days he fought against another chief prince, the prince of Persia. And that battle, it took Michael to come in because Gabriel was there already fighting it, okay? We're talking about fallen angels and the angels or messengers of our Father, two different groups. So the only argument, I think, in mainstream theology is whether Gog will be the actual spirit or a person that's inhabited by the spirit. That's about the only thing they can't quite agree on, and I really don't know where to go with that because it could happen either way. But now, when we talk about chief princes, like Michael, Gabriel, Gog, the prince of Persia, then we are talking about, again, two groups. One group is pretty much following the method of destruction, war. They don't like the earth, they don't like the planet, they don't like the people. The others are protectors. Michael was assigned this section, Gabriel, everybody. So we're dealing with, and if you think about wars in this area, guys, just don't leave all of history out. This is something that's upcoming, but what has happened in Iraq and Iran before? The Great Sumerian Wars, the Pyramid Wars, and they had gods and demigods. Remember that? Just saying. So, and what it was they were more technological, basically. They were smarter, and the people thought of them as gods. They were powerful. They had weapons. They had craft, things like that. So you've got to try to kind of weave through that and look at it and it's to really describe what it is. But this has been going on for a while in this area. And remember talk about the nuclear wars in the Sumerian texts, the Pyramid Wars and all of that. Are we about to see this again? Because now we're going to be bringing in a chief prince named Gog from the land of Magog. And I will turn thee back and put hooks into thy jaws. And I will bring thee forth, and all thine army, horses and horsemen, all of them clothed with all sorts of armor, even a great company, with bucklers and shields, all of them handling swords. Persia, Ethiopia, Libya with them, all of them with shield and helmet. And guys, this is gonna lead into Turkey. It will go into Ukraine. All of the stand nations will be pulled in it. Pakistan, Afghanistan. Again, Ukraine will be a major player, that area of coming against Israel. And that makes me think someone, either if they're tying Israel and the U.S. coalition as one entity in this study, then something happens. Could it be, again, we wouldn't know if it was a false flag or who really did it. Something like a big nuclear explosion or just mass human casualties, war raging on and whatever, and they got to rush in here and do it. But now we're dealing again with powerful spirits. Regardless of how you characterize them, I guess you'd say that. But, oh God, the chief prince of Meshach. God is talking to one of these fallen angels. Again, mentioning all the nations, Gomer and all his bands, the house of Togarmah and the north quarters and all his bands, and many people with thee. And as you search, this will be one of the phrases right there, and many people with thee, that the people that study this, the theologians and all of this, say indicates many more nations other than the ones just mentioned, right? Again, the Pakistan, Ukraine, all of this, much more of Turkey. We don't know what the crap Europe's going to do yet, do we? Look at Starmer. He doesn't even know what he's doing. Let's step back up to 38:7 just a moment. Right at the top, it says, Be thou prepared, and prepare for thyself, thou and all thy company that are assembled unto thee, and be thou a guard unto them. Who's he talking to? He's still talking to Ogog, the chief prince of Meshach. He says, I'm against thee. He's still talking to him. You get prepared. I want you ready. I want this to be ferocious. And what's the end result for Yahweh? He will prove to the world that he is the God of Israel. The mountains will shake. The greatest earthquake we've ever seen, or almost ever seen, will happen. The fish in the sea will feel it. The shaking, there will be hail and fire raining from the sky. Be some disease and pestilence. What happens at the end of all of that? Some type of mass confusion sets in, and each sword is turned upon the other. And that's biblical in another battle. And so they kill each other. That's something, but that will prove. Although there's going to be a lot of shaking going on. Again, the mountains are going to shake. The fish are going to feel it. A lot of stuff's going to happen. Great earthquake again. And that's going to happen when this happens. Again, he's talking to Gog. After many days thou shalt be visited. In the latter years thou shalt come into the land that is brought back from the sword, and is gathered out of many people, against the mountains of Israel, which have been always waste. But it is brought forth out of the nations, and they shall dwell safely, all of them. Thou shalt ascend and come like a storm. Again, Gog, he's talking to. Thou shalt be like a cloud to cover the land, thou and all thy bands. Again, here's that phrase. And many people with thee. Thou shalt, the Lord God, saith the Lord God, it shall also come to pass that at that same time shall things come into thy mind, and thou shalt think an evil thought. Maybe you thought you were coming in here, you were going to try to hold the peace. Suddenly you're going to take everything. You see that we can just take all the oil, all the minerals, and whatever, just take it, right? Maybe that's the evil thought, or complete destruction along with that. That evil thought could be nuclear. And thou shalt say, I will go up to the land of unwalled villages. I will go to them that are at rest, that dwell safely, all of them dwelling without walls and having neither bars nor gates. And so does this indicate, I'm not sure, just in the back of my mind, that suddenly there's a break in this war. Peace is called real temporary. Just real temporary, just like peace, 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 and then sudden destruction. Maybe the U.S. has pulled back. We don't know that yet. But that is symbolic in the language here of being at peace. This unwalled villages, I will go to them that are at rest. You rest in peace, not the R.I.P. that in the grave, but peaceful resting that dwells safely. All of them dwelling without walls and having neither bars nor gates. And so that again is symbolic of peace. And he says, when you're getting there, you're going to be there to take a spoil and to take a prey, to turn the hand upon the desolate places that are now inhabited, and upon the people that are gathered out of the nations, which have gotten cattle and goods that dwell in the midst of the land. Sheba and Dedan and the merchants of Tarshish. We talked about England and the ships of Tarshish, with all the young lions thereof, and of Tarshish, if it's correctly translated as Great Britain and the Isles, then how many nations did Britain basically overtake, become colonies all over the world, really, including the U.S. is the way it started, and it looks like with the banking situation, it still is. Anyway, he said, Sheba and Dedan and the merchants of Tarshish, which all the young lions thereof shall say unto thee, art thou come to take a spoil? Hast thou gathered the company to take a prey, to carry away silver and gold, to take away cattle and goods, to take a great spoil? We thought this was a peace mission. Therefore, son of man, prophesy and say unto Gog. He's telling Ezekiel. Ezekiel talked to Michael, remember? He can also talk to Gog. Thus saith the Lord God, in that day when my people of Israel dwelleth safely, shalt thou not know it? And of course Gog would know it. The entire world would know it, basically, with the internet, right? And thou shalt come up against my people of Israel as a cloud to cover the land. It shall be in the latter days I will bring thee against mine, and that the heathen may know me when I shall be sanctified in thee, O Gog, before their eyes. That sanctification in thee, O Gog, is not going to be a good consequence for you, because you're not dealing with just Michael. You're dealing with Yahweh. That's a level above. Thus saith the Lord God, art thou he of whom I have spoken in old time by my servants the prophets of Israel, which prophesied in those days many years that I would bring thee against them? And it shall come to pass at that same time, when Gog shall come against the land of Israel, saith the Lord God, that now this is it, my fury shall come in my face. Guys, if you've ever had to immediately get into a fight, if you're an old redneck, you've had plenty of that happen. You may get flustered, but it takes about, a half a second for that right hook or whatever's coming to get to the target. That's how we operate. Because that same spirit was placed here by our Father, because it's in His spirit. Do you understand what I'm saying? He's not going to sit there and his face just get red. He's coming with full fury at that moment. Again, my fury shall come up in my face, for in my jealousy and in the fire of my wrath I have spoken. Surely in that day shall be a great shaking in the land of Israel, so that the fishes of the sea and the fowls of the heaven and the beasts of the field and all creeping things that creep upon the earth and all the men that are upon the face of the earth shall shake at my presence. And the mountains shall be thrown down, and the steep places shall fall, and every wall shall fall to the ground. And I will call for a sword against him throughout all of my mountains, saith the Lord God. Every man's sword shall be against his brother. And I will plead against him with pestilence and with blood, and I will rain upon him and upon his bands and upon the many people that are with him. Again, that phrase, the many people. And overflowing rain and great hailstorms, fire and brimstone. So that's going to be a hell of a day at the end of this war. And we're right in seeing all of the nations it's talked about. You see my video, guys, with the different areas going through Africa. Again, Russia, going up through Turkey. going over into Iraq, Iran, and then the kings of the East, into China, into Asia. It's bringing the world together, and there's going to be a point made. Now, you got to think about this, guys. There are ministers of fire. I'm not talking about preachers. I'm talking about teachers. There's a big difference. I'm not a preacher because most of them can't teach or refuse to because they're tied to their congregational aspects as far as, no, we can't go down that road, preacher, but it's in the Bible. No, you're going to lose people in the church pews or something bigger, a bigger power. And I think most of you know what I'm talking about. I'm not going to mention any names or anything like that. I'm not pointing at any individual. But I've seen it in different congregations growing up, and I think that's why I've only been to a church once for a funeral, and let's see, I would say at least 50 years, 55 years. But I prefer my study from my back shelf and just praying and talking on my own. And studying, because what is said in there, it says you study to prove yourself worthy. Right? And what was the other thing? My people are destroyed by lack of knowledge. And this is what's going on. This is the live and current updates that we're getting from the Middle East. And this is attacks on the petroleum close to Tehran, inside of Iran itself. There, guys, you can see the fire and the smoke coming up here. And it's been kind of a tit for tat. But right now, from what I'm understanding, and they're saying that Iran is losing more missiles than it can create. They're getting low, possibly U.S. and Israel too in some aspects of it. We don't know. But the fact that now Israel and the U.S. is coming in with heavier bombardment to all of these places, and many of them in heavily populated areas, is my point of the hook in the jaw, or the trigger for the beginning of the hook. But the hook is set once they come in for humanitarian relief or peacekeeping, whatever they want to call it. That hook's still there. It just hadn't been snatched all the way into full battle yet. Now that picture's late Saturday night. It says U.S. and Israeli forces expanded their bombardment of Iran late Saturday, including with strikes on fuel depots near Tehran. As Iran's de facto leader vowed to continue retaliatory strikes and to make the nation's enemies pay the price for attacking it. Netanyahu said the attacks on fuel depots, which appear to be the first of Iran's energy infrastructure since the U.S. and Israel launched strikes on Iran last weekend, were part of Israel's attempt to reach many more targets in order to destabilize Iran's government and allow for change. And if I'm not mistaken, what he was talking about is some of these fuel depots specifically were for the Iranian military, for their ground vehicles. I don't think they've got much of an air force, and some of the Navy's been torn down, but it was fuel for the military, and so they have those very close to civilian areas. But it is crowded in those cities. And guys, just best thing we can do is pray for peace, but the timing is not ours, is it? Still pray for peace, but that time will come when it's someone else with a lot better sense and knowledge than we have decides it's time. But we're already seeing the hook being possibly pushed through the jaw, maybe not all the way through yet. Again, Iran is being helped by Russia, who has the same satellite capabilities we do. Now let's take a look at a video. Now this is a video, guys, I think it's about 58 seconds. I'm going to tail it at the end of the video. But this is how close these attacks, and this is outside of Tehran, basically not very far, if at all, but attacks from Israel and the U.S. last night. And so this is becoming very dangerous for that to bring many nations into this. Of course, the UN is already biting to get there, people like that, so that they can grift and graft. That's about all they do. But this is going to be a religious war, a spiritual war, in the fact that, again, we talked about the chief prince, didn't we? And there's going to be a couple of those involved. But anyway, let's play this through. Check it out. I'll put the link below to this particular article. And I came in from there. I'm not sure who did it. I think this is put up by the BBC. But anyway, a picture says 1,000 words. This is what's happening now. You guys check it out. Didn't mean to preach much this evening. It just happened that way. But anyway, think about what I'm telling you and remember what I said in the video yesterday. You prepare for a reset also, guys. It's possible. Anyway, it's a heads up. Be safe. Watch this video.